vegan 5.5 years ago, November 2015, and it feels like so long ago now. I remember I had a couple of friends who were vegan, not like close friends, so I knew what veganism was, and I understood why they did it, but it totally wasn't on my radar at all. I hear a lot of vegans say, "Oh, I used to be that person that was like, oh, bacon though," and basically the people that they're having to deal with now when they have these conversations about veganism. And I actually I was just very indifferent. I totally got why people did it, but it wasn't on my radar at all. And so I had these two friends who were vegan. They spoke about it a bit, but they weren't really trying to get me on board or anything. But I definitely think that they sort of planted that seed in my mind. And then I think it was probably about a year after, because one of them had been vegan for a really long time, and then one of them had been vegan for about a year by the time that I made the change. But in that year, I guess I saw more people online, creatives, especially. I remember seeing a tattoo artist. She was talking quite a lot about veganism, and I was like, okay, so I know more people that are doing this thing now. But ultimately, it was I think a video on Facebook of a farmer who had taken a calf away from the mother and put them on the back of a trailer, and they were driving away for a field, and the mother was running alongside the vehicle. And I don't know, it was just kind of that. I feel like the people that I knew that were vegan had kind of I don't know, I guess it made me think about it a bit more, and then just suddenly it became more common on social media, and just got to a point where I was like, oh, actually, yeah, I'm paying attention to this now. I can't, I'm not going to ignore this anymore. And that kind of did it for me. I wasn't vegetarian beforehand, although there was perhaps a little bit of foreshadowing. I didn't like most meat growing up, and my mum used to make vegetarian chilies and stuff with corn mince, and I never had beef burgers on a family barbecue because I thought it was all a bit gross. And so I felt like I was going to get to this point at some point, and so I went vegan 5.5 years ago, and only a couple months later I got involved in activism within my local town, and we started doing street outreach, Earthlings experience stuff, food tasting, all sorts of stuff. And I just met a lot of people in the local area who were also vegan. And it just really took off from there.
So was the kind of, obviously it sounds like the ethical route was the kind of route that led you in, brought you in. And, you probably from there quite quickly, I think probably by most people's standards, particularly now, I think who goes vegan probably doesn't necessarily end up in kind of the activism kind of space that quickly. Was there kind of, you mentioned there was some friends along the way. Was that a space that they were in already and kind of led you into, or were you kind of quite politically aware, prior to going vegan, etc.?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I was politically aware before going vegan at all. I think veganism has kind of been my little gateway into that. So when I first went vegan, it was actually through Instagram that I got chatting to someone who also lived in the same town, and they were interested in starting an outreach group in our town, and they wanted to. I think they'd done a couple of things up in London. And they, saw the opportunity to do it closer to home and got in touch with me, and said, look, do you want to come and try this out? And so, we just started. I mean, they started a couple months before me because they'd been vegan a bit longer, but then I joined, a couple months, I guess it was the start of 2016. And just started getting involved in, street activism, and slaughterhouse demos and stuff like that. And really, it was kind of from there that I sort of then started looking at like other issues. And I mean, I think a lot of people come into veganism the other way around. So they'll like have done a lot of human rights work, and it's naturally been like the right thing for them to do, to be like, okay, well, you know, if I'm going to be consistent in the way I feel about, you know, anti-oppression, then I'm naturally gonna not want to partake in animal exploitation as well. But for me, it was definitely animals first, and then now it's like a much broader thing for me.
Yeah. And your experience is gaining like a community around you, you know, in those first few months of big, you know, going into sort of street outreach and slaughterhouse demos and so on and so forth. Did you find that the community that you were building there was incredibly focused on the vegan message only, or was there a degree of, you know, intersectionality across that group? And was that kind of, if there was that kind of unique to that group, do you think, or is that something you've experienced in every group you've been a part of so far?
Yeah, you know, I guess when we first started out, it was very much single issue. It was just about animal exploitation, and like I guess you'd say it was more focused on food. But there was, I think it was just unique to the group of people that we were. You know, I've learned a lot from those people that set up that outreach. They, I think, were more politically minded than I was at that time. They'd been vegan for a bit longer and definitely were going to other events, you know, women's rights marches and climate change marches and things like that. So a lot of what I learned about other oppression was from them. And I definitely do feel like it is unique. Like I've gone to a lot of other like events where it has been very much about animals, and like I've tried to have conversations with people about other things, and it's kind of not really been something that anyone wants to talk about. Yeah, I think ultimately that kind of is, so what happened was we'd started this group in town and it got a lot of people along, but I think after a couple of years there was quite a difference of opinion on how we should do that. So whereas we were becoming more aware of other issues and the intersections of oppression, you know, there were a lot of people that were very much, well, I'm vegan for the animals, I only want to, you know, focus on the animals, and there was a bit of a fallout over that. So I don't think that is something that is happening a lot. Like I didn't say that right. I think there are a lot of groups who are very focused on animals only.
Why do you think that is? I know that's like a really big question, but what to me it's always seemed fairly logical that a system that puts in place one form of oppression, and those, you know, those powers, if you like, that are putting that system in place, who are the 1%, if you like, that they probably have their hand on other forms of oppression. You know, it that would logically follow to me. You know, I'd never consider myself to be an expert in that field, but certainly from people I've spoken to, it seems logical. So it almost seems illogical to me when people will say, well, it seems illogical when they absolutely deny the existence of any connection.
Yeah.
I could sort of vaguely, broadly understand somebody saying, I feel comfortable in this. I don't necessarily think it's, you know, right, and we all have I think a responsibility to try and educate ourselves and get better at different areas and be more help to those, you know, those groups, but and better allies, etc. But I can see why somebody might say, well, that I'm comfortable with the single issue, and so it's not that I don't see those oppressions. I see them, but I just don't feel comfortable being a spokesperson, being an ally in that space, and maybe I should. But I don't necessarily understand when there's a complete, like well, they don't belong to each other, and there's almost a denial of it. You know, what's your view on that? You know, is that something that, is it a case of there are both of those types of single issue folks, or?
I think there's so many different reasons. I think that what's different about animal rights is that we're advocating on behalf of animals who I wouldn't say they're voiceless. I think that they have a voice and that we don't listen or we don't understand. But, you know, animals can't say to us, look, I don't like the way you're doing this. So vegans, I think, can be quite comfortable in like, okay, I'm going to do this form of activism that I'm comfortable with, and they won't be challenged. Whereas I think, you know, if you're going to venture into, you know, talking out against racism as part of like all of the Black Lives Matter stuff that happened last year, like I think people were sometimes afraid because they are maybe worried that they'll say something wrong, do something wrong. And so, yeah, it's like a comfort zone thing, as they know that they can just do what they're doing with the animal rights stuff. And yeah, what was the other? I'm trying to think of the other. I was like, there's so many reasons. I completely lost my train of thought now.
Well, I suppose that's like that was my long rambling question. Sorry.
No, it's cool.
Well, I think I was more. It was less of a question, more thinking aloud, because it's just one of those where I can see why. I mean, like you've illustrated there, I can see folks saying that. You know, I don't feel comfortable getting involved in those other issues. It's when there's like an active denial, like it's not our space, it's not our job to get involved in those things. It's not even necessarily connected. You know, we're all trying to jump on these bandwagon, all that kind of rhetoric. I don't really understand. I think it does feel logical to me that there's a connection between these things, but you know,
no, absolutely. I mean, if we actually want to see a vegan world, I don't know how we possibly could without looking at all the other issues, because how are we ever going to have a world where we're not like exploiting animals? You know, animals are totally free to do their own thing, but we're still, you know, we've still got slave labor, child labor, you know, black people are still being killed in horrific ways, and there's still racism, homophobia, everyone's ableist. Like it goes hand in hand, because, and I don't know, I often think, how can we get people to truly care about what's happening to animals if we aren't even yet at the point where we truly care about what is happening to each other? And I also think that like the society we live in, we all work long hours. The time that we have to ourselves is so short that it can be overwhelming to think, well, you know, I need to be doing this, and this, but I've only got time to do one. And maybe people decide, well, I'm just gonna advocate for animals. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, because we are all limited in the time we have. But yeah, the problem I think there is like you mentioned, is this denial, or, you know, it's just sort of burying your head in the sand about other issues, which I just ultimately don't think helps the movement or helps the animals either. I think it's going to like make the journey to a vegan world, if that is even possible, a longer one. You know, I see so many people, well, not even so many people, but just in my experience, like people that, basically will say horrible things like, you know, they won't stand with people who are fighting, you know, racism because they eat meat. And it's like, I don't get that though, because if you want a vegan world, then these are the people you need to be having conversations with.
Yeah.
And like, you've got common ground, surely, because you're both fighting for something. And I think that's often missed, is that we've got all these different groups fighting oppression, and they're all might be different things, but ultimately we're all really passionate about ending this injustice, no matter what it is. And surely that's all common ground for us to have conversations. They're the people that we're probably going to make the most progress with.
At that point that you make there, that there are many folks in the sort of quote unquote community who would who will say, you know, I won't be part of, let's say, and I know there's many views on this particular group, but I just pluck them out just as a, you know, as an example. But take Extinction Rebellion.
Yep.
There's lots of people that will say, I, as a vegan, won't take part in anything to do with Extinction Rebellion because those folks aren't vegan. And so I think you kind of, you strike upon a really interesting point there, that I think that I wouldn't say I've seen it a huge. I've you know, I see loads and loads of it, but then I'm also conscious of my social media bubble, so I might be talking to, you know, preaching to the converted, who are folks who all sort of think, well, obviously these things are all intersected, you know, and I definitely, I'd stand with somebody who ate meat, because otherwise how am I going to, you know, have any conversation about how these things can connect at some point, so on and so forth. But yeah, do you see, from your perspective, do you see more of that kind of that viewpoint, that there's sort of almost, as we've become more polarized, social media culture, etc., that there are more vegans, if you like, who are wanting to become entrenched in that kind of almost like wear the badge and like distance themselves, or have you seen actually with the sharing of kind of information and social media that there's actually probably people are far more aware of lots of different issues and more willing to accept that there are other things to get involved with?
You know, it's difficult because, like you, I've got my own social media bubble and I've shut out like everything that I just find harmful. So I'd like to think that people are learning, and there are, you know, this is one of the good things about social media, is there are a lot of people out there doing good work, and you just need to find them. So I do think, and like with podcasts as well, like I listen to so many podcasts and these topics are being discussed more and more, you know, about these intersections. And so I like to think that people are becoming more aware, but I'm skeptical about whether that is actually the case, because I do shut myself off from it a bit.
Yeah. I suppose I sort of feel a little bit like maybe somebody who kind of straddles the worlds a little bit with the podcast being quite varied and having lots of different folks on. And I'll get your view on this. I definitely see, on one side, I see some people doing some incredibly meaningful, thought-provoking work in the space of educating me, whether it be on, you know, what systems of oppression exist, better use of language, you know, to support more people across all communities, you know, whatever it may be. I see lots of those people, and I personally love to follow them, as it feels like it's an education, and they send me off into different places to go and read things and learn more, and I think that's fantastic. On the other side of things, and I'm sort of just painting this in a very simplistic binary just for the purposes of discussion, but I also see kind of the influencer community, if you like. So I see, and I don't necessarily mean the big like vegan influencers, the Eds, the Aspies, all these kind of big names. I mean, like, I see lots of people wanting to be a lifestyle sort of vegan influencer, you know, wanting to be a chef or be you know, on holiday or whatever it may be, but to sort of say, I'm, you know, this is my vegan account and this is me living my best vegan life kind of thing. And I've had lots of sort of like discussions with people, a few on the podcast, but lots of discussions with people off the podcast about whether that is useful or effective. And I still haven't really come to a conclusion. Sometimes I think it is, because it brings in people from, you know, like just like we said before, there's people out there who aren't aware of any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So to hit them with, you know, let's all pick out the nuances of the language that we're all using in this particular space, when they might not be aware of anything that you're talking about, might be like, so like, what are you know, because personally, it's probably taken me, you know, 4 years plus to get to that point. and for others, they, you know, their entry point might be, you know, they just want to cook a great meal in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You know,
No.
but I'd love to get your view on the value of that, like,
Yeah.
binary.
Yeah. No. I think like it's just really important to understand that like everyone, when nothing is black and white. You know, like you said, it's taken you a long time. It's taken me, 5 years to really get to the point where I'm even confident enough to have a conversation with you about this. So yeah, I don't know. I think, you know, the society we live in, and the way that like we have social media now, I think it's kind of natural that people are wanting to, you know, create businesses and be influencers, and you know, you got to make your money somehow. And I think, like you said, when people are coming into veganism, you just need all these places for people to go, and they'll find the right place for them. And it is, you know, you just learn as you go along. My worry with social media is that it's just that it kind of, for me, I feel like lacks diversity sometimes. And I worry that, you know, if you come into veganism and, you know, the first thing you see is one of the more prominent vegan celebs, as we call them, is that's kind of like, that becomes what they see veganism as. And I worry that there's not like enough, I guess, critical thought, and like not enough seeing all of these different issues in the first place. So like I understand that I can't expect people to immediately understand all of these different intersections, especially when a lot of the language around it is quite hard to understand. Like it's not the most accessible stuff. So I do get that, and like I wouldn't like outcast someone because they follow James Aspey or something, even though I disagree with James Aspey. I just worry though that it becomes an issue when they decide that, you know, James Aspey or Joey Carbstrong or, you know, whoever else has said this thing, it then becomes like, well, they said it, so that's all there is. And I feel like there's a lot of work being done by a lot of incredible people who just don't have the platform. And so, yeah, when I say diversity, I mean, if you look at the big players in like the vegan movement or animal rights activism, you know, they're all cisgendered white men. And it's kind of like, well, why is that? Like, why are we not seeing a more diverse range of influencers who are talking about different issues? Especially as like we know that there are more women in the movement than there are men. Yep. And especially as I think I read this somewhere, but I wouldn't be able to give a source right now, but the Black community is like the fastest growing vegan community. And it's kind of like, well, so why is it then that we have these like select, you know, 3 or 5 white men as the kind of like poster boys for veganism and for animal rights? Like, why is that? And kind of like, you know, I do see that as an issue, but I think it's not something that you would first think about when you come into veganism. And I understand that, like, you're just trying to navigate animal oppression. So you can't expect people to understand everything. You know, God, there's so much I don't understand, and I'm, you know, 5 years down the line. So I don't know what the answer to that is, because how do you find these other people, and how do you get people to engage with content that isn't, you know, automatically shoved right under their noses?
I was going to ask that. Why do you think that is the case? Because, you know, I'll give an example. There's an account, it's an Instagram account you probably follow, called The Black Project. I don't know if you've seen it, but they've been doing this fascinating experiment recently where they'll post their usual content, and then like on a particular day they'll post like the winner of the Bake Off or something, who was like, you know, a a white person, a white male, or whatever. They'll post that image. I'll pick that one out specifically because that's what they did post a couple of weeks back.
Yeah.
And they were kind of like, if you've not seen our last 3 posts, but you've seen this post, then don't like it. Go back and read the rest of our content. Kind of basically saying the algorithm here has been built in such a way that it is like, I don't know the proper terminology. I don't know if is that officially shadow banning? Is that what you'd call that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just that it's not shown to as many. Like, it's just not shown.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah. I was trying to be too cool there. But
no, you might be right.
I think that's what it's. Whatever. But it's not shown. It's not shown to people.
Yeah.
But yet the Bake Off winner is, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So my going back to my question is: do you think that the reason we have these 3 to 5 influencers who are all of a certain gender, sexuality, background, etc., is that the result of is it sort of a nature or nurture thing? Is it something we've been given through social media and sort of almost the old media structures still exist? It's just that they've got a vegan label on the front door, or is it something else going on? Insofar as like actually the vegan community, just like any community, is a mirror of mainstream culture, and so we're still in this space. We're not any more woke than anybody else, any other community, even though we might think we are. It might not be either of those, but that's
I was actually going to bring up what you said. Like, I think, like when you look at the way that the media reports on things, even just your general media, but like then if you look at vegan news sites and stuff, they kind of prop these people up, don't they? They talk about the James Aspys and the Joey Carbstrongs, and you see it in like organizations like PETA as well, like in the way that they use celebrities, and quite often white celebrities, and the way they use naked white women to like push their campaigns and stuff. I do think it is a mirror of culture in general. Although, I mean, I do think that the algorithm online is definitely part of that. I just do think it's part of a wider issue that we still are propping up white people and white men. Yeah.
It's such a tricky one, isn't it? Because it does feel very much like, which came first? Which was it that people wanted this content, or was it that it was served? I really struggle with that. Which way round it is?
Yeah, and I don't know, and I want to make the point as well that James Ashby and Earthling Ed, they are good speakers. They have provided good content. So I'm not going to deny that, even though I think that there are problems with those people. They have kind of worked their way into the vegan movement, and then I guess they've been grabbed and pushed by I guess other celebrities, and I don't know, because like when you think about influencers, like what makes an influencer anyway? And to me, it's usually someone that is doing like adverts for companies and stuff. And I do think that is something that James Aspey has done. I think he was marketing CBD oil or something at some point. So I think there is an element of like, businesses will probably prop them up as well. They're like, they're a poster for consumerism and capitalism.
Sort of self-fulfilling in a way, isn't it? It's like you kind of you maybe are finding your way into this world and thinking, I'd like to make a career out of this, probably with good intentions. At the beginning, maybe you think, well, I've got quite a good ability to speak and so on, and then somebody says to you, well, you're good at that, why don't I, a company sort of comes along and says, well, I'll give you money to talk about this. why don't you talk? And you're a vegan. I suppose you're a vegan company, or you're talking about something vegan. Yeah, I'll do that. And I suppose it's then self-fulfilling. It's like you were sort of taught to act that way so that you could get the attention of those companies, whether you did it consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like if you were I've had conversations with people who kind of know how social media works before, because I've sort of, as somebody who's trying to get a podcast to be popular, I suppose.
Yeah.
I still haven't really worked out why. There's probably some deep psychological issue going on there, but that's for another podcast. But for whatever reason, I decided it was important that I did it, and so I've spoken to lots of people about this, and they very much speak about it in terms of, it's something that you need to learn. You need to learn what content you need to put out, and when you need to put it out, and who you need to target, and all this kind of stuff. And that very much sort of speaks to me you need to learn what the existing system and structure is. Don't try and be any different to it. Just be the person that you're supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's more of a thought than a question.
No, absolutely. And I remember there was a post that James Aspey did, which was here. You probably saw this. It was him, and there was a pig hung upside down in the background, about to be killed.
I did see it.
And he got a lot of backlash for that, because it's like, why are you posing with an animal that's literally about to have their throat cut? And he did explain actually that he gets more engagement on his posts when he is in his posts, and that's true. He's not making that up. That is true.
That's a fact.
Yeah. So, and also, like, these people are connected as well, and they're probably asking those questions of how can I get my content seen more? And they're using the system, and there's nothing wrong with that, really. Like, it's there to be manipulated. And I think Earthlyn Ed has an agent, doesn't he? He has a publicist or something. I
think he's got a whole PR kind of company, isn't he? Surge Activism is its own thing, if you like, its own company.
Yeah. So
but then I don't know, you sort of then think, I suppose the problem with it is you've then got somebody, and I'm thinking of like the Beyond Species podcast, which is an excellent podcast and a great resource for people, and I advocate people have a listen, and it's far more deep thinking than mine. But I definitely, I'm the ITV to their BBC 4, but not to offend you. You should be over there. You shouldn't be with me. No. But yeah, like they do fantastic work on that podcast, and are very true in the way that they engage on social media. Like, it's very much like, here's the title of the episode, and here's the cover, and I suppose the only rule it would follow is like, does your grid look great? Kind of thing. It follows that rule, that a grid looks great, but it's not one that's like, the presenter's got his shirt off on the, and it's like, it's not following all of the rules. But at the same time, as a result, and I'm sure it gets a ton of listeners, but you could argue, well, that's not going to connect to the mainstream because they're never going to see it, because the algorithm won't push that forward, because it's not, no one at Instagram, well, no one's doing it manually anyway, but there's no one wrote any code that said, if somebody's putting out something that's really like meaningful and thoughtful and then push it forward. They did the opposite. So I just wonder, like, how much do you court that and not lose your what it was that made you useful and valid, and should you court it? It's just such a challenge, isn't it? Like, what do you do?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, short of advertising, like, I couldn't say how you would organically grow your channel enough, without putting a ton of money behind it,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know you. And even then, I'd imagine. So I saw something from Tabitha Brown recently.
Yes.
Of the sort of carrot bacon fame back in the I say back in the day, it was probably about a year ago, but she's like meteoric rise, and like, you know, she's incredible. You know, she's just, you could listen to her voice all day. She's just like, her cooking's brilliant, and I just love it. It's so much fun.
Yeah, she's great.
But she posted something the other day that was talking about a recent case of one of the daily cases of police brutality in the States, and a murder that had taken place again. And she was talking about how she did this post about talking about that and her feelings on it. It was quite a raw kind of like, I just want to jump on a camera and say what I think. And she was saying it essentially, like, it got shadow banned. That was definitely the word she used this time. And that made me think as well, like, how's that happened? Because that's one of the, she's found a way to not be the norm and become hugely popular. She's courted it enough to you know, be successful. But then at the moment she said something that was considered controversial, and it, you know, it wasn't, it was just fact, but it's considered, she got shut down. And that just, that is terrifying, really.
I mean, that is, well, it's censoring, isn't it? So but there seems to be a lot more of that. Definitely, like around police brutality, like anything that kind of is challenging the status quo, or, you know, the systems that are in place, is getting shut down. Like, people are being silenced, and that is scary because they're doing it really easily. And I don't know what their algorithm is, but it is scary.
Yeah, there seems like an element of I don't know if it's manual, but there's like somebody would have somewhere had to have said, I would have thought that content shouldn't be pushed.
I think they flag words, don't they? They flag words and phrases and imagery. So that's why a lot of the time people will like remove certain letters from words and use like a symbol, because it kind of gets around that. Right.
And there's a bit of a trend of screenshotting, isn't there, rather than reposting or sharing.
Yeah.
But I guess for the same purposes, I'm not as clued up. So why would you do that?
I've only done that because if I don't want, so if I want to share something problematic that I think someone has done, and I don't want them to get, like, don't want to direct people to their site or for them to get the engagement, I'll just screenshot it so that people don't go directly there.
Right. So that kind of stops the clickbait kind of vibe of something.
Yeah. So you can, so if someone, so like when James Aspey was doing a lot of the animal holocaust stuff, you know, you, like, if you wanted to make people aware that it was an issue without, you know, sharing his post so that he got a boost from that, you would just screenshot it and make people aware. And it's also good because then people can't click through to it as easily, so you're not promoting it at the same. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So going back to that point about influencing, is there kind of do you think there's a kind of a cut-off point? And I appreciate you can't, you know, neither of us are the arbiters of where that cut-off point is, but, you know, just for you as a consumer of this kind of content, member of the community, and somebody that I would definitely consider a sage voice within it from what I can see, you know, for you, is there like a cut-off point of like, I can see why this person is doing what they're doing, it's of, you know, but they're also, you know, their heart's in the right place, and they're not trying to cause harm with it. You know, is there a cut off line for you versus actually that's too much and you're literally just trying to, you know, provoke and play the system?
It depends on each individual, you know. I don't want to focus too much on James Aspey. Like, I don't want to just make this podcast about him, but I think, like, the worrying thing is with the people who are named folks within the community is there's a lot of, I should say there's a lack of transparency. So, you know, we know that James Aspie, I think Earthling Ed, and various people have Patreons, for example, and they have YouTubes and they're monetizing what they're doing, but there's no transparency there about where that money goes. And that's, you know, that's very different to if you were to give to a charity, for example. You know, a charity has to provide all their financial performance records and stuff like that. And I just feel like if people aren't transparent, that's kind of a red flag for me. And it's when it seems to become an ego issue as well. I just really struggle to find like I completely lost my train of thought again. Help! God's sake.
I think I see where I see where you're going with it. Like definitely, the transparency piece, particularly. I think what just jumped to mind was I don't know if you follow much of George Monbiot's work. He's not really like a social media type person. But he's more on Twitter. I think more than certainly. I think he had an Instagram account, but doesn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
But his website posts like his earnings and what he's done with them. You know, literally down to like, here's my mortgage payment. This was I was given. You know, down to like the BBC paid for me to do X, Y, and Z when they asked me to appear on this show, and they paid my taxi here and they paid for my meal there, and like it's like that transparent, and like I was like, hats off, you know.
Fair play.
If I was in that position, I'd love to think that that's what I'd do. Would be, you know, I mean, thankfully this podcast is thousands in the hole, so I'm making. I'd be a short post. I owe a lot of people money, basically. But yeah, I'd love to think if I was in that position, that's what I'd do. And it feels like such a simple thing to remedy. I think there was a thing with the particular person who shall not be named, where it was exactly that. There was a bit about, you know, pay me some money. And there was lots of people going, well, what are you going to do?
What is it for? Yeah. Like, what do you want it for? And he was so secretive about it. And then you find out it's a crypto investment scheme. And I mean, I think some people were annoyed, but I have to say, like, why were you giving money in the first place? Like, when he didn't tell you what it was for. But then, you know, I guess, like, yeah, if you follow James Aspie for a long time and you liked his talks and what he's done, then you trust these people. But I just think it's dishonest to not tell people what you're asking money for, especially if you are jetting off around the world during a pandemic and posting photos of you and your wife just, you know, hanging out. I just think, yeah. But I mean, I don't know. They don't have to share that information, but I think that we should demand that information because they're claiming to use it for good. You know, James Aspie is claiming that he's going to make money out of this scheme so that he can support sanctuaries and stuff. And, well, we'll see if that happens. But, yeah. Yeah,
it's a tricky one. I think, you know, to try and I know I took us down this particular Aspie rabbit hole, but I think, like, it comes back to the point I think you made earlier that about critical thinking, like right at the beginning you were talking about critical thinking, and I think there's an element of, like, if people want to give money to him or anybody else, then that's up to them. They can do what they like.
Yeah.
But do it with your eyes open. Yeah. You know, do it knowing that where the money could go and be comfortable with that. You know, we were talking about this because I do a bit of stuff with Green Gazelles, the rugby club thing. And it's getting off the ground and we're sort of, you know, we're shaping things, and obviously there's elements of bills to pay and bits and pieces. So
Yeah.
but we're really like, we have a lot of discussion about how to make sure that what we're doing is, if we're raising money for something, so where are we giving it and what for? And if we're going to make some money out of something, then who's going to get the benefit of that?
Yeah.
And we keep coming back to like people like Tower Hill Stables, like Fiona Oakes's sanctuary, because it feels transparent, it feels genuine. We can see the benefit. There's and on the flip side, if I'm sure it needs funding, don't get me wrong, but if Earthling Eds opens up a sanctuary, and I think there was an example of that where there was a post that he got quite a lot of criticism for, because it was like a picture of like him doing the kind of outstretched, like sort of saviour, leaning into the vegan Jesus, to the vegan Jesus thing that's that's obviously he's either acquired or is nurtured or whatever. But yeah, there was a discussion, I think, about should we we'll give money to that one because it's it's Earthling Heads, and it's like, well, why? Like, there's lots of sanctuaries out there that need
already established,
more.
and struggling,
and have been there and I was thinking of Fiona Oakes, who's like literally like for years has trying to keep the lights on, can't pay for anybody or anything, and is very transparent about when she asks for money. It's like, I need £200 to buy this, and in fact you could just go to the website if you like and buy it, and ship it to ship it here, because it's animal feed for the 50 horses or whatever I've got at the sanctuary. It just feels like, do your homework, give your money where you're comfortable giving it, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess you've just got to make sure that you're comfortable, and you've got to make sure that you have the information. Is the person you're giving the money to, what do you know about them? Like, what have they done with it in the past? Like, how are you going to know that they follow through on what they've promised? And is there a way to go around that? Like, we're talking about sanctuaries. Give to sanctuaries directly, give to your local sanctuary, give to your local hunt sabs, give, sort of cut out these middlemen, as it were, and do it that way. And like, I understand that people like Earthling Ed are, they are dedicating their life to it, so it is like a full-time job. So, from that respect, it's like, well, they do need to make an income, otherwise how do they live? But I just feel like there's just no way of knowing how much they're earning and what they're using it for. When you add up things like YouTube and Patreon and like all the speaking, the payments they get for speaking at events and things, and I understand as well that people want to support people like this because they themselves maybe aren't as confident to go out and do the kind of work. And I get that. I don't want to suggest that like everyone can just go out and do what Earthling Ed does or what James does, because that's not fair, and I think that would be bordering on ableist, because not everyone is able to go and do that. But at the same time, it worries me that we think that we can just peddle a load of money into a handful of people and that's going to change the world. It's not. We need collective action, we need grassroots movements, and we need lots of people doing lots of different things, giving all our hard-earned money that we've been working our butts off for to a few people who, from my experience of what I see, are living pretty lavish lifestyles, just doesn't scream animal liberation to me. And that's what worries me. Like, I want to see people supporting the small sanctuaries, supporting the local small businesses, supporting the hunt sabs and those taking direct action who are actually, risking their lives and saving lives at the same time.
I love that point. It feels like a perfect place to end, because it was just I couldn't agree more. Like, give money to your local hunt sabs, your local sanctuaries, know 100% where it's going, and it's going to make an impact, you know, because there's people doing that work, you know. And if I get that, you know, going out and hunt subbing isn't for everybody,
for sure,
you know, I'll be honest, it's not something that I feel like capable of doing. I'd love to think that I could at some point, but you know, I don't feel like I could. But giving my money to people at least feels like something that I can do to help. You know, if it keeps a vehicle on the road, or you know, because it has a real. That's what I love about those things. It's like I was talking about the Fiona Oaks example, is a real. This is what I'm doing.
It's tangible, isn't it?
Yeah, I need this for this.
Yeah.
Our Land Rover doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. Like the horses need feeding. Like that it makes sense to me. But the kind of the by osmosis kind of like, well, if I have a great life, people will then look at me and say, well, I want a great life too. Maybe I should be vegan. Like that feels so tenuous and extrapolated that I'm not doing it.
I'm not doing it. It's just not like, it's not achievable for everyone as well. It just reeks of, you know, capitalism in the way that people say, oh, if you just work hard enough, you can be like Jeff Bezos. It's like, no, you can't.
No, you can't.
You're not gonna be. And the only way that you get to be like that is by exploiting people. And that is that.
I so agree with that. I think that's something that's a sort of myth that that I think sort of capitalist society, Western society peddles a lot, and is a bit, as we've all sort of we're all unknowingly the victims of this idea of perpetual growth. You know, I posted it again today, this little segment of like, I don't know what show he was on, like George Monbiot talking about. He was on like some Frankie Boyle show. I don't know what hell show this was. So it's bizarre that he said it on it. But this whole, he was talking about growth and saying, you know, we're only asking for 3% growth. And he was saying, you add that up 24 years. With what we're saying is the economy is going to double in 24 years. So who is going to pay for that? Because that's the nature of it. When someone wins, someone loses. And it's either the environment, a community that we can't see, because, you know, as long as they're far enough away and you can't see them, then you'll be fine with it. You know, animals, it could be anybody, but someone is going to lose. And I thought that was I feel like BBC in 2021 wouldn't have put that quote out at all, but but they did then. So but yeah, I think it's you're spot on. It's sort of the curse of capitalism, if you like, that we're all sort of we all blame each other rather than the sort of system.
Yeah, you know, it's a distraction, isn't it? It's a divide and conquer, and whilst you're at it, work 40 hours a week, so you're so exhausted you don't want to challenge us.
Yeah, totally.
Who has the energy?
On that gloriously positive note, we never set out to make light entertainment, to be fair.
No, so, I think you knew what you were getting yourself into when you invited me on here, to be honest.
Well, I wanted to talk about this stuff, and I thought you know, I couldn't think of anybody more equipped.
I don't know.
So, well, I've always enjoyed the stuff that you post and so on. I always, you know, there's you and a few others who I see as a bit of a guiding light, bit of a barometer for me. So, yeah, I appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, thanks for having me on to ramble nonsense. I appreciate that.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks, Nic.
Thanks, Jim.